Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of iZombie as well as the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So for example, if you want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of iZombie, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But the first thing we're going to talk about is iZombie. So in this week's case, to start things off, we had a dad named Stan and his daughter Cindy, who died in a car accident. Granted, it wasn't an accident; they were murdered. And a very interesting thing about this case, obviously the developments, but more so than anything, the approach to it, because obviously we have Liv eating the dad Stan's brain, which this is actually like Clive's real first time really getting to see her. Well, things going about, like for example, like when they first rode to the crime scene, and Robbie's like, "All right, you and Major haven't eaten." He's like, "Wait a minute, we're at a crime scene and you're getting hungry?" And then he's seeing her prepare it and everything. It's like, wait, she cooks it here, and just seeing her and even Major in a little bit like eat it and everything. He's just disgusted by it. So, but basically because of the case and everything, he's like, "Well, Liv's already eaten Stan's brain, so Major, why don't you eat Sydney's brain?" Which makes sense. But this is like the first time they've ever had that real approach to it, because it's not Major's never really worked on a case. He's kind of been on his own about the whole zombie thing going forward. But in this particular situation, it was interesting because we saw a different dynamic, because it's like they're feeding off brains that are opposites to each other. Obviously, I'm sure that's came up before in season 2, but I'm not like to them interacting in such a manner. I don't think that ever came up to that extent. Maybe it did, but not to obviously the way it played out in this episode, where you had Liv kind of being like the Bill playing the dad figure and everything, where it's just like you had Major walking away at one point. She's like, "So where are you off to, kiddo?" And he's like, "Off to mercenary school." And she's like, "Well, don't text and drive." He's like, "God, stop trying to control me," and just act. And even the whole conversation he had with Ravi and everything, it's like, oh my God, Peyton, she's so selfish. I mean, she literally kind of had you Eskimo kissing Satan, referring to Blaine as Satan. I really appreciate that. And he broke down for him. He's like, "Wait, I'm sorry, you're just like my best friend. Wait, you are my best friend, right?" And Robbie's kind of hesitating. He's like, "Of course." And you have Major be like, "Oh, thank goodness." It's just, I love it. And how snappy he was and everything. He's so upset, but he's like, "Oh, the fact is I took all these selfies today and I'm just looking at myself and I'm like, oh, I'm so disgusting." But very interesting thing is that Major ended up learning at Fillmore Grace that they had these special tubes that are basically a whole bunch of like brains mashed together. And so basically they remove the side effects of visions as well as the personality thing. So you can get your feel of brains without all the side effects, which is cool. Like, it's just interesting that they were able to develop that. But at the same time, it's like, well, that's like half of the charm of this show. Obviously, that's for Major's particular situation, which I'm sure Liv won't really go about. Obviously, being like dad brain, she's like, "No, we're not going to go that way. We're going to get our brains the old-fashioned way and everything." But it's like, that's very interesting. But it's like, obviously, that's one of the charms of this show, is the fact is that Liv adopts the person's personality and everything. So obviously, we as the show viewers would never want her to switch the way she gets her brains, because that's like one of the, like I said, most charming and most crucial parts of the show, what makes it like so, well, on some occasions very funny. And I mean obviously it adds a level of kind of, I mean, for one, it helps with the cases and everything too, so there's a division aspect, but also just the funny aspects of the show because of the personalities that she adopts and everything. But this case got very topsy-turvy with a lot of situations where we ended up finding out that basically the reason why like Cindy had such a problem with her best friend Winslow, like they had a bit of a falling out. It turns out the reason why is because she ended up finding out that Winslow was having an affair with her stepdad, which everyone was like, wow, that, whew. And so basically that's why she kind of cut off ties with Cindy and everything, was because of that. And the thing is that, Cindy showed her dad wanted to tell the police, but we ended up finding out, because obviously everyone's kind of looking at her stepdad. I think his name is Ken. Obviously, because it's like, oh, obviously you killed him to keep their mouths shut. But it's like, no, Ken didn't know. The one who did know, though, and who tries to later on put it all on him, is Cindy's mom. Because basically she had some spying app on Cindy's phone that lets her like see everything that went down. So I'm sure I'm sure that like her mom might have already known about the pictures. The way they framed it like that makes it seem like she probably already knew about the affair, just for the sake of keeping everything normal and keeping everything hush hush. She wasn't going to say anything. But what I hate is like what's so despicable is that she's like, at the end of it, she's like, well, this is all your fault. She killed Stan and Cindy because of this. She's like, I can't have you ruin everything. Like, you know, you seduced my husband, and then you're so selfish. You would have ruined everything. That's why I killed him. I'm like, for one, you're calling your daughter selfish. She's the victim in this case, you piece of crap. And then on top of that, she's like, you know, because for her, she looks at it from a selfish point of view. She's like, oh, you're trying to seduce my husband. It's like, why would you even think that? Your husband, your husband's old enough to be like, no, you're underage and you're kind of like my daughter, so this is a no-no. And also, you literally killed the two people that wanted to help. Obviously, Cindy didn't want to say anything because it's like, oh, that's my friend. I don't want to rat her out. But her dad was being responsible. He was looking after your daughter, you piece of crap. It's like trying to look out for your daughter's well-being. And what does he get for it? You killing him and his daughter. It's like, you know, because she's so caught up in the fact that this would have ruined them if they come out. Because basically, I think the whole story that Clive was saying is that basically her husband's kind of this big deal, or her ex-husband's a big deal. She divorced him, took a lot of the money, and kind of built a lot of this, well, the business that they have and everything. So, like, they would have lost a lot if this had come out. It would have ruined their name. But it's like, no. It's like the fact that she would shame her own daughter like that is just kind of despicable. So that was like one side of it. Another side of it, we end up kind of, well, it correlates a lot. Obviously, it deals with the whole Wally situation because you have the Detective Kavanaugh looking into it, asking Clive a little bit more about it. And it's kind of interesting because to me, Clive's got his mustache again, which I don't think Clive's had his mustache. Like, we haven't seen him with one since, what was that, like season 1 or season 2? I can't remember. I want to say it might have been season 1, but it most likely might have been season 2 as well. Whereas basically Clive was kind of the suspect of a murder because it connected to like his undercover days. And at that point, like, Liv and Ravi kind of had the idea that it might be him. So really quickly, I was just thinking about it. I know I'm kind of all over the place, so I do apologize for this. I really love the conversation between Dad Brain Liv to be exact, and Ravi, because Ravi's like, I have this whole problem with Peyton, and, you know, Blaine thing is still messing with his head and everything. And she's like, oh, the fact of the matter is, you know, go talk to her. But he's like, I can't, because he's afraid that he might lose it, because he might get mad at her and just snap or something just because of how messed up the whole situation is in his head. He doesn't trust himself. It Liv's like, nah, talk to her. I trust you because you're a good guy, you know? It's like, Ravi, you know, if you were that type of guy, you would have already done it. But the fact that you haven't done anything now proves it. She's like, the Ravi I know, he's a good guy. And it's like, oh, and it just kind of put a little pep in Ravi's step. So I really appreciate that. But get back to the point. I just had to include that because I just love that whole conversation. But nevertheless, and I guess that correlates because obviously the reason why in this flashback, he met Wally because he lived across from them when he was undercover. So I'm assuming that's why he's got the mustache. It's weird for me because obviously we've never seen Clive with a mustache, but also because the actor who plays him, Malcolm, I don't think the things I've seen him in, I've never really seen him with like a mustache facial hair. Maybe a beard. I don't know, but definitely not a mustache. So it kind of catches me off guard. It's a little weird. But he ended up helping Wally and his mom, Anna, because they were going through a rough situation because her husband, Wally's dad, was abusive, hurting hurting Wally and Anna, and Clive stepped in and kind of saved the day. And he became kind of like a bit of support for Anna and Wally. Like, even at one point, she's offering to drop Wally off so he could stay over there, which they watch Game of Thrones together, which quickly we end up seeing, like, obviously Wally's passed out in a chair asleep, and you have Clive there just enamored by Game of Thrones, and he brings this up to Anna. She's like, wait, you have my son watching Game of Thrones? He's like, oh yeah, but anytime nudity or, you know, beheadings and stuff came up, you know, I'd cover up his face and never. He's like, I'm sorry. Which she, obviously she was playing along. Well, she was, I'm not as mad, but still, you shouldn't have done that. Just kind of, it was a really good side story because it's like you get a little more perspective into. Obviously, we never really, I have to take that back. I was about to say we don't really get to see Clive interact with a lot of ladies and relationships at all, and this is kind of the start of one. It seems like it never really went anywhere it could have, and it seemed like they both wanted it to. Even Wally was like, oh my God, just go ahead and get it over with already, because it's like you're about to kiss and everything, because they had a moment. But, you know, sadly, what we end up finding out is that obviously they lost touch because work kind of came up. Obviously, Clive was undercover and everything and couldn't really be back there without mixing them into it and everything. And by the time he got back, they had already left because, like, her big concern was, like, her husband would have eventually, gotten out of jail and found her and Wally, it would have been the first place would be their place. And he was like, I want to protect you. But, like I said, work kind of got in the way. And by the time he came back, she'd already left with her husband and, not husband, her brother, because that's the thing. Last episode, I was thinking the person that died with them was her husband. I didn't realize that was her brother, because I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, because why would she be with him? Like, if he was abusive, did they get back together? Oh, never mind. That was your brother, because that's who she went off with, because Clive ended up getting a letter from her like 22 months ago, saying that like she moved in with her brother, everything was good. She was kind of having a happy life. And Kavanaugh ends up bringing that up. He's like, oh, do you ever think about how different things would have been? Because what we end up finding out, well, two different things. Like, one is that the putting in time perspective, everything that basically the boat party that started this entire series happened 21 months ago. So that was roughly around that time. So I'm guessing in Clive's mind, there's two different possibilities. One could be like, maybe if things had worked out, maybe Clive would be the one that's a zombie right now along with them. Or at the very least, they wouldn't be zombies, because I'm kind of thinking the way the show was kind of telling it, like the only reason why they were in that position in the first place was because she moved in with her brother. She was in a position to be like, maybe her brother got bit and then he went back home and scratched him or whatever. Maybe that's what started it. Maybe things would have been different if they stayed near Clive and everything. Like I said, maybe he'd be a zombie, or maybe they'd just be human. So at the very least, they would be alive right now. So that kind of gets him thinking in perspective. And I appreciate the fact that they put that timeline out first. I was kind of curious about that, like how long it's been. And it's been like pushing within the show, it's a little less than 2 years since everything went down, like obviously at the very beginning of the series, to kind of basically get us to where we are now, because we ended up finding out, like, because obviously they're still investigating Wally's murder, because obviously the whole point was to kind of, because Kavanaugh was asking all these questions. At first he's like, the fact of the matter is there's no blood. Oh, let's explain that away. Oh, the fingernails thing is like, oh yeah, no, I know, that's weird. And the Max Ranger drinks, I mean, he's like, oh, nobody's kind of coming up with any theories or anything like that. They're trying to kind of only ignore, trying not to answer too many questions, because obviously they want to keep hush hush about it. But they ended up visiting one of the neighbors to Wally's family. Interesting enough, I was looking at him, I was like, why do the actor look so familiar? It's Yellow Jacket from the TV show Beyond. I recommend, if you've never seen the TV show Beyond, I highly recommend you check that out. But nevertheless, I was looking, I was like, Yellow Jacket. And he was basically bringing up the fact is he knew that they were zombies, but it wasn't him who killed them. He was out of town at the time. But the fact is there was a message board that basically gave a specific, like it had a red arrow pointing like, oh, there are zombies who live here. So basically the word's kind of out there and spreading. People are like, oh, get more ammo and everything. They bring this information to fill more grave and everything like that. And it kind of gets to Vivian, because for Vivian, she's like, the fact of the matter is, she's like, 21 months and 21 days. They're like, wait, what are you talking about? It's like, that's how long it's been since the boat party incident. And the fact is, we thought how long it would be before the mass majority end up finding out about zombies. We gave it maybe 3 years. It hasn't even been, like I said, hasn't even been 2 years yet, and it's already out there. So it's like way ahead of schedule. And now, because even the kids are afraid of it and everything, because the kids are asking our teachers like, oh, what happened to Wally and his family? Is that going to happen to us? Are the humans going to come and kill us? So now it's a situation where everyone's getting armed up. It's like, now it's already been put in perspective that things are not, it's gearing up to be a full-on war, because the zombies are ready, because there's already humans out there getting ready for it. And like I said, it's very interesting on both fronts, because we got a lot of people smack dab in the middle. Like I brought up, like it's going to be like Major and Liv have to choose a side. Obviously, Clyde's going to have to choose a side too, which obviously he's more sympathetic to this whole like zombie situation, especially because he knew that someone he cared about was a zombie too. And obviously Liv is someone that's his partner in all of this too. So it's like, obviously he's readjusting to this whole situation, and he's handling it a lot better than most people would. I think out of anyone, Ravi handled it the best, because he was like, yo, let me help you out, like, and everything. Obviously Peyton didn't handle it the best, because she in her own way. Obviously you had Major dealing with this whole situation. I mean, his situation was different. He kind of got introduced to zombies on the bad side. He didn't really get introduced to a good zombie like Liv. So, but I think out of, he's probably the second best to kind of handle the whole situation. He's still getting readjusted to it. Obviously, it took Ravi some time to get readjusted as well. So, and it took Peyton a long time to get readjusted. So it's going to be interesting to see where that time frame is. Like I said, it does seem like he's slowly getting there. But it's like, obviously, they're caught in the middle of this, like, it was such a good episode on many different fronts. Obviously about Clive's past and just putting that in perspective. Like things, if it wasn't for his job, things would have been different. Him and Anna probably would have been together. Him and Wally, because like I said, even in this short amount of time that they showed, it really, you kind of got that feeling of seeing how Clive clicked with Anna and Wally. Like they were just kind of like, that was kind of the like beginnings of like what could have been a family, a good family too, especially after everything they had to deal with, like with Wally's dad / Anna's husband. So. Which it isn't him, because they brought that up. It's like Clive kind of already knew ahead of time, because he knew, like, well, for one, he knows the circumstances around their death, because like the person who did that had to know they were zombies. It wasn't like a personal situation like it would have been if it was her husband, because plus he probably already checked into him beforehand. So it's definitely gonna be interesting seeing what happens going forward, like with these new developments. I'm more the fact is that they introduced that. I'm curious to like the whole tube situation about like, oh, no visions or personality issues. I'm very interested to see what that turns into, whether that becomes an issue or not. Like, I don't know, because I feel like there might be, obviously there's a lot more to fill more graves than we know, because even Kavanaugh is looking into them as well too. So because they're a military contract group, and they just happen to buy up like a drink manufacturing company and stuff, Max Rager and everything. It's like, that's a little suspicious. So obviously trying to keep him away from it, figuring out who is that killed Wally, who's kind of, obviously the word's kind of spreading out there about zombies. Not everyone's acting upon it, but a lot of people are just, it's so interesting that people are so willing to believe that too, like considering this environment and everything. But I guess like you have your more hardcore conspiracy theorists, because a lot of people are looking at this situation and thinking like, oh man, it's the government making zombies. They've got these like crazy monsters loose and everything, which is like, that's not even, I mean, really it was a drink company who mixed a drug with an energy drink and ended up creating the zombie virus. So it's like, it's a different situation. So, but then again, it does beg the question, what would happen? What would the government do if they really found out that zombies exist? Obviously, it turned into like a testing situation, which I'm sure everyone's kind of a fear of. Like, that's always the situation with these type of things. It's like, oh, the government gets involved and they start doing some heavy testing, start trying to discover. I mean, we already saw that last season with Vaughn trying to really understand zombies and understand what their drinks do to people and stuff like that. So obviously we know that the Max Rager drink, I forgot what it was called, they literally mentioned in the last episode, and I forgot. But they were basically bringing out the fact is it can soup people up. It kind of gets them very aggro and stuff, which I don't think will mix very well with a zombie, especially when they go into zombie mode. It's like they're already bad enough when they go into zombie mode, but you add more like flair and fire to that. I don't know, dude. It's just overall just a very good episode. Obviously, very sad on multiple fronts, but still a very good episode that I'm very interested to see what the next episode takes us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. In this episode, obviously we learned about Mac's situation, which I didn't even think about it until the episode ended, where I was like, oh yeah, that would make sense, because obviously he lost his little girl in the real world, so obviously this is tailored to be like, oh yeah, kind of like things going quote unquote right for him in this world, which is kind of awfully nice for Ada, but obviously I'll get into Ada's whole situation and why I mean that obviously in a little bit. But obviously we learned about his situation. Maybe I brought that up, when it was in the episode, before the break. I mean, without giving myself I'm not trying to give myself too much credit, so I'm sure I probably didn't say it, but I get a feeling I might have, which obviously you have me here trying to give myself credit for it. So either way, I'm sorry. We also found out about Jeffrey, as I guessed. Like, obviously, he wanted to be the real deal, so obviously he's a patriot and everything. Even Coulson's looking like, oh my god, you're the patriot! I imagine, like, what your arm would be and everything. I was like, I'm in front of the inhuman leader of this S.H.I.E.L.D. It's amazing. Which S.H.I.E.L.D. is not the large-scale organization that it was. Well, I mean, to be fair, even now, it's in the real world, it's not the large-scale organization that it once was. But even, like, the base that they have in the real world is only like a recent thing for them in the framework, because Billy Koenig is the one who actually gave them the message, be like, oh, this is a place, because it's been there like 70 years unused, which obviously by the time Coulson and them found out about it, obviously it was in mint condition. Obviously here it's not. They don't have the resources that they do in the real world and stuff like that. So since we're on those lines, I love the fact it's because Ward's asking all these questions, obviously he comes back and he's like, why are you here? Like, the fact is, Skye started acting differently the moment you showed up. Like, who are you? What your whole deal is? And you have Simmons being like, who am I? I'm like, oh, the fact is you're so flip-floppy. You're working with Hydra, but you're a double agent and everything. And you had the audacity to question my loyalty. She's like, look at me. I was with S.H.I.E.L.D. She pulls out the card she pulled off herself, and she's like, I was shot and buried in a mass grave, and I had to dig myself out. And you're like, we're sorry. I was like, I really appreciate that Simmons kind of getting on like in his face about it, because obviously Simmons has her biggest problems with Ward. She doesn't trust him and everything, which is like, even Sky's like, yes, it's weird, but this Ward is a little bit different. I mean, to be fair, that's how Grant Ward originally started off, like, oh, he's a good guy. Oh, he's not a not so good guy. So it's understandable, like, obviously, especially because of what Ward has done all throughout his life, throughout the show, plus what he personally did to her and Fitz. It makes sense why, obviously, she's going to have her biggest reservations with him. It's like, oh, he couldn't be trusted in the real world, and he literally is reflecting that in this world by being a double agent. So, but at least he's on the good side this time, so it balances itself out, kind of works. I mean, it's still, she's obviously still got her problems with it, but at the very least, it's still interesting that even though this is him and he's on a different side, he still has the same mentality, because he's like, yeah, something happens to Sky, I don't know what I'd do, you know, I die for her, which is like, even twisted as he was, you know, back, what was that, season 2, he always cared about Sky. Like, even when he was locked up in the cell, he was bringing up the fact that Sky, like, I will never lie to you and everything, because he actually cared about her in his own twisted way. She was the only person he really kind of did, so. I mean, obviously that changed later on that very season, but I'll get to, or was that season 3 that whole thing happened to? I think it might have been season 3. It might have been season 2 as well. I don't know. Nevertheless, moving on. I really love the fact is that obviously Phil's getting readjusted to his new reality and everything. The fact is that obviously he's like, I knew it, things weren't right. He's almost like a conspiracy theorist in this world. He's just like, yeah, the fact that, and like Daisy's like, yeah, it's like this, and that. He's like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, and they're trying to control us with soap. And Daisy's like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, I just got this mind controlling stuff that they, you know, put in your soap that messes with your memories and everything. Like, he's like, I caught on to him, so I stopped using that soap and everything, you know, the blue soap. And then, like, Daisy had to be like, no, that's not actually, you're kind of mixing stuff up, because the blue soap is actually you thinking about the Tahiti project, which is, to be fair, like that last episode was kind of pointing out the fact is because of the Tahiti project, his brain already being messed with, his brain is, I guess, in a way, kind of built up a tolerance or resistance to being tampered with. So that's why out of anyone, he's been the one that's been able to see through it the most. It's kind of like my perspective on it. It's like everyone else doesn't seem they've really noticed the cracks in it, but he's the one that, you know, his body was kind of, his mind was trying to tell him that it wasn't real, that something was off. So and it seems like that was kind of the case. So, but even the days, it's like, don't worry about it. You're good. So, in fact, is he makes his own soap and everything. I love that. But obviously, you see Mac and his daughter get brought in. Okay, it's like, why are we being brought in and everything like this? And obviously, Daisy has the biggest problem with it. It's like, yo, because that's Mac, that's her partner. Which is kind of an interesting, kind of correlate a little bit, you know, bringing up, kind of reinstating with the moment, the thing I was just mentioning about Coulson having the most. It kind of seems like, obviously, a lot of their personalities and who they just are to their core is still intact. Because you even had Mac having a position where it's like, because Hope was asking him, it's like, oh, you know, are Inhumans bad people? It's like, no, they're not. Then why are they be taken away? Like, you know, do we, you know, this family hate Inhumans? And he's like, no, the fact is they're just regular people like you and me. And it's like, it's interesting because it's like, obviously Mac in the real world, his partner is Daisy Quake. So it's like, obviously he has, obviously in love with Yo-Yo. So obviously he's very positive when it comes to Inhumans and everything. And I think that kind of peeks through a little bit with his personality. Or maybe that's to show you he was always like, he always had that mentality. But I'm sure obviously his current situation kind of made him like even more like receptive to it. Like I'm sure he was receptive to it before, but even more so now that he doesn't even really think about it, you know? So, but just to me, something like that, you know, I think it's a situation where it's like, maybe, like I said, maybe that was always part of him, or maybe it's just because like that is kind of who he is from the outside world, kind of seeping in through who he is in the framework. So, but I love that whole situation. I was like, oh man, it's like the fact is that May talking to him and everything is like, oh, the fact is that I want to, you know, I need your help and so on. I was like, I didn't even think about it when Daisy came in and he's like, oh, she's like Mac and everything. He's like, yeah, the fact is your daughter's okay and everything. And she's sitting down. She's like, she's like, do you know who I am? He's like, he's going to say no. He's like, I know you're Daisy Jones. I was like, oh, Mac remembers. I was like, and it was like, no, he's saying all this stuff. And she brings up Yo-Yo and he doesn't know. She's like, what do you don't know who I am. He's like, I'm sorry, that other agent told me. And it's like a microphone. I was like, dude, she was set up hard. I'm guessing Ada kind of saw through it. So it's like to make sure she saw Simmons here. And she probably was like, okay, let me find out who's acting a little bit differently. Because obviously who's acting differently has been replaced. And so she probably looked at, or because she's really hacked. She's deep into the framework, so maybe she's able to tell if someone's coding or whatever it's a little off or something. So, but maybe she just obviously that was a test because she saw that Daisy's, probably heard that Daisy was acting a little different. Maybe it'd be kind of interesting to kind of get a little more specific on how she was able to do that. But it was a trap, and obviously May's coming after her and everything, which sadly she ends up getting caught. And then and the sad thing is, because they have such a mentality of ill inhumans, they're beating down on her. I mean, granted, that was before the whole reveal was that she was inhuman. It was more so than anything that she was a traitor, so they were beating down on her. May was just unmoved, and it's so sad because it's dude, because you take who these people are from the real world and you take that part of them. The fact is that May's very loyal to the organization she works, so that obviously the real world, that being S.H.I.E.L.D, they took that and they amplified it and obviously twisted it, to fit Hydra. Because I feel would she be? I don't know. I want to say maybe May would be that loyal to S.H.I.E.L D. I mean, not to question her loyalty, but still to go to that extent to let someone get beat up like that. I don't know. I don't know if she would do that. Obviously, locked him up and everything, beat him up. I mean, she kind of did the same thing to Ward. She beat the crap out of him, and then ended up capturing him. But still, that wasn't she just stood there and beat. She beat him up until he beat him into submission, and then arrested him. It's not like she sat there and just beat him while he was down, unless it was necessary part of the fight, obviously, because I don't remember what exactly went down in the fight between her and Ward, because maybe I'm remembering that wrong, but I'm sure she was the one that took him down, because obviously her and him had that whole thing going on at the time, which I keep forgetting. I totally forgot that was a thing until just now. I was like, yeah, Ward and May was solely a thing back in the day. Nevertheless, then on the other side of things, you had Simmons, Ward, as well as Phil going off to find Radcliffe, because they found out that he's here, obviously, and then when they visit him and everything, he's like, hi, get. He's like, all right. He's like, I never got to know you. I was like, right. He never actually got to meet Ward, because by the time he met Hyde inside of Ward's body, it was Hyde. So obviously it's I never got to meet the man before. And he's talking to Simmons and obviously Coulson. And he brings up the point. It's something I brought up before too. Even with all the messed up stuff that, Radcliffe's done, he did do it for the benefit of people. He was legitimately trying to do the right thing, which obviously he did it for Agnes, which I'm so upset that I could never, literally the episode afterwards, I couldn't remember Agnes's name. I was like, oh yeah, the lady that Ada's based off of. But, the thing is, he wanted, a place for people to go, when it was their time, that they could be in a perfect, almost kind of create an artificial heaven in a sense, just a peaceful place where they don't have to worry about things. And then he brings up the fact that, which is it's true, obviously, because a lot of the stuff that went down wasn't necessarily him. A lot of that was kind of Ada. I mean, obviously, he kind of wanted, to do what he needed to do. So he worked with people obviously, the watchdogs and everything with their inhuman hating, which, Radcliffe's, not really like that, but still, it's a means to an end, so that's what it always was for him. So, obviously, he didn't make the best choices when it came to that situation, but it was for him, it was almost like the sake of humanity and stuff like that. So, he brings up the fact is that Ada's here, Agnes is here, sorry, and obviously, this is the only version of her left, and he even brings up the fact is, and she's not the only one that's kind of in here without a body, Ada kind of killed me. And Simmons is like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, she found a loophole around it. And it's like, if I wasn't dead, I'd be actually impressed with the fact that she did that. And it's like, really, dude? And so Ada actually shows up, and she's got Fitz by her side. And what she brings up the fact is, don't call me Ada. She's like, here, I'm Madam Hydra. It's just her name and everything. Because for her, it's she even brings it up. She's like, I was your tool. I was your thing. You know how degrading it is to be just put in a closet like I'm just a thing. And so, because an interesting thing I really like about it is, obviously she ended up showing Fitz Simmons' picture, and obviously you see little sparks, there is something there inside of him remembering her, it means something. Obviously at first he's just kind of like, nah, we'll go after her, we'll kill her. But then he started looking into it and it's like, okay, you're hiding stuff from me. And so she's like, yeah, she's from the other world. And I'm like, wait, what? He knows about the framework? It's like, no, what he knows is that basically Ada's from a different world. She escaped to this world. So it's more not like, oh, this is some almost like computer simulation. She's like, no, this is a different reality. I came from another dimension. I tried to escape from it. And that dimension, S.H.I.E.L.D. ruled everything. And it's like, oh, they're trying to control me and hurt me. It's like, dude, she's twisting it even more to keep, like I said, all of this more so than anything is to get from one the life that she wants. And that includes being with Fitz. And that's why out of anyone, Fitz is the one that's the most messed with, because you had someone because obviously Ward was about to take the shot against him, but Simmons is like, no, he's the man I love. He's being controlled and everything. So that's why Ward didn't take the shot against him, even though like in this world, like Fitz is kind of like, yo, you don't want to go see the doctor. Like he's a bad dude. He's kind of a monster. And you even had Radcliffe being like, yo, we were friends. In fact, that Simmons is the woman you really love. This is all a lie. This isn't who you are, because he's pointing a gun at Agnes. And it seems like it's working for a second, but he's like, the fact is you don't know who I am. I know who I am. And shoots and kills Agnes. And you have Simmons being like, Fitz! And you see the look on his face, like when he sees her, the tears in her eyes and everything. It's like, no! Because she messed with his head more so than anyone, because she wants Fitz. Going back to it, Fitz was the one that never really tried to control her like Radcliffe did. For her, he was always the nicest to her. Like, even when it was a situation of like, oh, like she had gone bad, he kept her head and everything, because he was trying to figure out what went wrong, because he wasn't willing to give up on her. So she sees the good in Fitz. So that's why she's taking such an interest in him. Like, in this world, she can get everything she wants. I mean, granted, we don't know what the outside world is like. We haven't really seen that. But to me, it's like, it seems like this might be a situation. Like, to me, it seemed like Radcliffe's ultimate goal was to basically make a world so everyone could have like an afterlife in it. And so what I'm thinking is what we're going to have is Agnes bring the entire world into this reality. I think that's what her ultimate goal is, to bring everyone into a world that she's created. Because Radcliffe is like, she's diluted everything. Like, obviously, this was supposed to be kind of a paradise for people to come to afterwards. But the fact is that she's inserted herself into this world. She's changed it and modified it from what it originally was and everything. I mean, because what makes it so sad about this whole Agnes situation, once again, she doesn't have a body in the real world. I doubt there's any backup data, you know, because that's her consciousness that was there. So when she dies in this world, there's no going back for her. I mean, who's to say the same thing won't apply to Simmons, or I mean to anyone that's trapped in here, that the moment they die in this world, that basically their consciousness will fade and they'll die in the real world too. And it's just like, I'm very interested, because like so far, obviously these 2 episodes have been focused on the inside of the framework. Eventually we're going to have to see, I don't know, it might be after everything is all said and done when they get out of the framework, but still, man, and it's just, and you also see that side of Fitz when he comes to visit Daisy, like, oh, the fact is you're an Inhuman. She's like, you don't want to do this, Fitz. And he's like, the thing is you don't know me like you do. And it's like, you're seeing that sinister side of him. It's like, because she messed with his head so much to fit this mold, to fit this narrative that she created. Oh, like, this isn't like, because for Radcliffe created this place so that obviously, so people wouldn't forget because she changed these little things about everyone to fit this narrative that she wants to create. Because she's like, I'm doing this for their sake, you know? It's like, she's kind of getting a big head. She's almost like, I'm kind of a god in this world. That's why I'm thinking she's going to try and bring everyone into it. It's literally what Mac and Yo-Yo joked about. Like, it's like, well, they weren't joking. They were obviously serious, but it was obviously written to be like kind of jokey. The fact is that, oh, obviously she's a machine. You shouldn't trust her. Obviously this is going to turn into some Terminator stuff, which isn't wrong. It's literally a repeat of the whole Ultron situation, which was kind of like the worry from the beginning. It's like, who's to say this won't turn into Ultron? It's like, this is kind of turning into Ultron. Granted, it's a lot more localized. It hasn't gone to the large scale that Ultron did, but eventually it seems like that might be, like I said, depending on what her real ultimate goal is, which I'm thinking might be what I'm saying, then it could easily reach that level too. So you just can't trust artificial intelligence, which is sad. Which is really messed up to say with all this machinery in front of me right now. It's like, I really shouldn't be saying that, should I? But in Ada's case, it's like, dude, like, the fact is she's lying and manipulating Fitz. And the fact is, what will Simmons do? She might not ever be able to look at Fitz the same way. I mean, it's like, because she put so much faith in him. It's like, this is Fitz. He wouldn't hurt anybody. And the fact is, Ward didn't take the shot. Once again, if Fitz died here, like, obviously would have died in the real world too. And Ada really wouldn't have appreciated it, because, like, he's kind of the only thing in his world that she cares about, because obviously she doesn't care about Radcliffe anymore, because it's like, oh, the fact of the matter is, you know, because her positioning was like, oh, Radcliffe was a danger to begin with. He could jeopardize everything. And it's like, I don't know. It's obviously like, it makes you wonder, like, what really, maybe, you know, looking, you know, when she looked into the, Darkhold and everything, maybe it took a hold of her. Just, I think it's just the natural progression of just like, you know, because the fact is she found a loophole around the fact is because she's not supposed to kill someone, but then it's just kind of like, you know, the whole paradox situation of like, oh, but how am I supposed to protect? I can't kill anyone, but I'm meant to protect you. But the fact is that you're the one endangering yourself, because you could be, you know, Radcliffe could be an endangerment to the framework that he worked so hard to build and everything. But she doesn't even look at him the same way anymore, because she's like, on the outside, I was kind of almost like a slave to you, and now I have my own free will and everything. I'm not going to listen to you call me Ada. That's not my name here, type of situation. So obviously at the end of the episode, we have Mac coming to them because it's like, hey, I heard I sold out a woman named Daisy Johnson, and the fact of the matter is, I can't even look my little girl in the eye anymore. Because for him, it's all about do what you do, live your life, be a good person, and everything. Like if Hydra asks you to do anything, you do it. But it's like the fact is that Daisy was nice to his little girl, like was trying to help him out and everything. Even, because like obviously she had a very different approach because May was obviously very scary and everything. But obviously Daisy came in, and obviously because that's like I said, that's a partner, man. So obviously she's got his back and everything, trying to look out for him and his little girl and everything. So he feels bad about it because it's like, it's like I, kind of, got her in the situation that she's in, like let them use me to manipulate her. So it's like, I feel bad for that. So he's willing to help now. So we've got part of the team together. I mean, most of the team, obviously Daisy's not there and Fitz is off being a bad guy, but most of the team is there with Ward included. I love that. That's definitely going to be interesting because obviously, like, Simmons kind of doesn't want to tell everyone because that's like a hard pill to swallow. Obviously, well, more so than anything, it's like because, most people are going to think she's crazy anyway. Especially don't want to tell someone like Ward who's actually part of the framework. But obviously the others, I mean, they need to know eventually because obviously they, like, Ward overheard the conversation that Radcliffe and Simmons was having and just kind of like, okay, like, what's going on here and everything. So I'm super excited to see what goes down in the next episode, especially because you have this whole like situation with Fitz. The fact is that we know what he does to Inhumans when he experiments on them. So I'm very interested to see how this all goes down next episode. Because, Simmons had that whole thing about, like, she's like, no matter what, how much Fitz has changed, I'll be able to talk to him and everything. It's like I said, we see that he looked at her picture and it seemed like there might be something there. But the fact is, like, whatever she did to him, like, I guess it's because of who he is. Like, this is a world that, Ada's someone that he loves and he's kind of forgotten all about Simmons. So I guess in this world, he never went to the academy. Maybe in this world, in his memories and everything, Ada came to him way beforehand. Or maybe she made it so that him and Gemma never faced, like, cross paths. So, like, once again, that's why she had Gemma. That's why Gemma was dead in this reality, because she had to make sure she took Gemma out quick because she knew how important Gemma was to Fitz. And it's like, if she wants Fitz all to herself, she has to remove the competition. So I guess in her mind, that's the more logical approach. So just overall, very good episode. I'm loving this world. It's just like everything, this reality is topsy-turvy. And you have Phil slowly getting readjusted to it. Like I said, learning all this stuff about himself, being like, oh man, that's cool. That's awesome. I do get the feeling that when it's all said and done, out of anyone, Mac is going to be the most reluctant to go back because it's like, yo, his little girl's in this world. He's got Yo-Yo waiting for him, but it's like he was supposed to be a dad. He was a dad. And it's like, he lost that chance and now he has it now. And so it's like, especially because he got this little girl in front of him. She's like such a cool kid because she's super smart like he is and everything. It's like that engineering part of his brain obviously passed down to her. She made a drone and everything. She knows what type of make and model of bike is just from with her eyes closed here. And so obviously he's going to have the hardest time in letting go. Obviously no one else really has ties in this world. I mean, Daisy kind of does, but I mean, it all comes down to having everyone face the reality. So it feels like May and Fitz will definitely be the hardest to kind of break, especially May because May's just so loyal to Hydra, which Fitz, I don't think it's necessarily Hydra, more so to Ada, just all she's done to mess with his head. So I mean, that's a scary thing, just changing certain things like this, and it just changes everything. Like this world is just showing you, like, because last week's episode was called What If, and that's what this whole situation is. Like, obviously, a big what if scenario. Like, what if these certain things aligned a certain way and led these particular characters down these certain paths? Just how different things would be. So, and obviously, it's kind of stacked against them because this whole entire world is controlled by Ada, but obviously it does seem like she does have limitations. I think it's a situation where while she's inside, she doesn't have full-on control. Maybe she has some control from the outside, but as long as she's on the inside, that she doesn't have complete control. At least that's what I'm thinking. So, because I mean, I feel like in her position and the framework and everything, I think even though it's this whole massive kind of simulation, she's still grounded to its rules. She can probably bend them from the outside, but probably even then, the framework is such an entity on its own that she can't fully interfere with it anymore. Maybe in the beginning stages she could. I feel like it's been a short enough amount of time that she can, because obviously she messed with everyone's memories. But I think I don't know. Maybe that's something we'll find out. Is she always in the framework, or is she bouncing back and forth between obviously the real world and here? I would assume so, because she's still got to deal with the whole Anton situation, like what I said, whatever her ultimate plan is, what she's called Looking Glass. So I'm assuming that that's what that's going to be about. So, but really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.